werewolves and monsters. They exist among us, and sometimes they win. Even the devil was an angel once. The world has its own rules, and these rules are not human. Some of us seek answers to the origin and existence of cryptids and the unexplained. Join us as we venture beyond the known and accepted boundaries. Welcome to our nightmare. I think you're going to like it.
Hey folks, good evening and welcome to Phantoms and Monsters Radio. Thanks for joining me. And I want to welcome all new members to the channel as well as first timers into the chat. If you're listening before the first time, please and like and subscribe to the channel. Also, I want to thank our chat moderators, Bernadette, Marla, Thomas, Mike, and Tina. If you have any questions about anything, feel free to ask them. So, tonight, let me ask you this. What is a werewolf? Now, in European folklore, it's a human who turns into a wolf at night and devours animals, people, or corpses, but returns to human form by day. Now, it's said that some werewolves change shape at will. Others, in whom the condition is hereditary or acquired by being bitten by a werewolf, change shape involuntarily and under the influence of a full moon. In French folklore, the werewolf is called loup-garou. France was particularly afflicted with reports of them in the 16th century, and there were many notable convictions and executions of loup-garous. Now, the werewolf phenomena may have a medical explanation. For instance, take Peter the Wild Boy. In 1725, he was found wandering naked on all fours through the German forest. Many thought he was a werewolf, or at least raised by wolves. Research has shown that Peter likely had Pitt-Hopkins syndrome, a condition discovered in 1978 that causes lack of speech, seizures, distinct facial features, difficulty breathing, and intellectual challenges. The rare psychiatric condition that causes people to believe they're changing into a wolf or another animal is called lycanthropy. Now, throughout the centuries, people have used werewolves and other mythic beasts to explain the unexplained. In modern times, however, most believe werewolves are nothing more than pulp culture horror icons made famous thanks to Hollywood's version of the Wolfman, who was mostly portrayed by my namesake, Lon Chaney Jr. Still, werewolves have a cult following. There are sightings reported each year as evidence of what I'm presenting to you. So, is the werewolf more than just a legend? What are people reporting? Listen to these accounts and form your opinion. So before I go any further, I want to mention that this channel is made possible by you clicking on the subscribe and like buttons and by you sharing our programming. Super chat and super thanks donations are appreciated. You can click the dollar icon located below the chat box. The Buy Me a Coffee link is also shown below. So thanks for your consideration. Now, if you're in the chat and have a question, please use all caps. I'll try to get to each one of them after my presentation. And I'll let you know when I'm on the last account so you can start posting your questions. So, this first account, a former Montana resident describes his encounters with a cryptid canine not long after moving into his new home. The red-eyed beast left an indelible impression on the witness. Now, he wrote to me, "Hello. This event happened in mid-July 2015. I lived in Montana outside of a rural community with a population of about 2,000. Now, during this time, I lived in a small one floor ranch home by myself. My nearest neighbor lived 1 mile away and was a farmer. I never had many strange encounters leading up to this one, but the woods by my house always had an ominous feeling about it. Now, soon after moving in, I realized why the previous homeowners left quickly. I'd start to hear noises in the woods. These weren't just any noise, but sounded like blood curdling screams and growls. Now, after some research, I learned that even something like a raccoon or a bobcat can make these unnatural noises, and I chalked it up to that. But still, it just never felt right. It's hard to explain, but I never felt like this before, and it was just something about those woods around my house that made me uncomfortable, like I was always being watched. So the first experience I can't explain happened about 2 weeks after I moved in. There was a thunderstorm, and the thunder was loud enough to keep me awake. I never did feel comfortable in storms by myself. The lightning was crazy and would light up the whole surrounding area for a fraction of a second. I was lying on the couch and got up to get a glass and a drink at the sink. It's about 2 a.m., if I recall correctly. Above it, there's a small window that gives a view of my yard leading up to the tree line. When the next flash of lightning hit, I saw it. Admittedly, it wasn't a long view, but it gave me enough time to see whatever this thing was. It was near the tree line, just a few steps into my yard. At first, I thought it was a bear, but it wasn't. It was standing on two legs with its face pointed towards the house. Its legs were like a dog. I could clearly make out the hocks. It was hard to tell the color of the fur, but it was dark. Its upper body was massive with wide torso and arms that could almost reach the ground from standing. The strangest thing is how the upper body seemed to dwarf the lower body. Now, after standing there frozen in shock, I waited for the next lightning strike, but when it happened, it wasn't there. It happened so quickly and was gone so quickly. Now, after that, I bought a gun and I would sleep with it within arm's reach. The next encounter is what I consider the most frightening thing of my life. For several weeks, nothing worth noting happened. I don't get cable where I live, and one night I was watching something and my satellite kept acting up. I didn't like going outside at night, but this would be quick, and I just had to move the antenna a bit. Now, nothing had happened for a few weeks, so I decided it was just go out and do it. I grabbed my gun and flashlight and went out. The first thing I noticed was the eerie quietness that surrounded me. Now, this time of year at night, the woods are active with all types of creatures. Not tonight. Despite the fear I was developing, I made my way over to the satellite dish and began to adjust it. I heard a small snap of a stick and quickly turned to my left and shined the light towards the direction of the noise. When I saw what I saw will horrify me for the rest of my life. I was immediately met with red eyes. These eyes were the color of blood, and they were evil. The head of this thing looked like a mutated German shepherd. I don't like to say it, but it looked like a werewolf. A long snout and pointed ears. The fur was black and shaggy in some places. I could see this creature's extremely developed musculature, and it dwarfed even the biggest humans on Earth. It was half in and half out of the woods, almost crouching, and still came up to my head at 6 foot. Fully standing, this thing would have been 8 foot, I estimated. I was about 20 feet from this thing. I didn't even consider my gun, which I bought to protect me. Chances are, in hindsight, the little 223 bullets would have just pissed this thing off before it tore me to shreds. I backed away slowly, never breaking eye contact with it. I gently picked up my gun and my fight or flight reflexes kicked in. I chose flight. Maybe not the best option, but even if I stayed there, this thing would have killed me. I ran the fastest I ever have in my life, and I didn't turn back once. I had no idea if it was pursuing me. I got in the house, locked every door and window, covered the blinds, and sat with my back against the wall, cradling the gun the entire night. I didn't even get a wink of sleep that night, and very few the following days. To make a long story short, I don't live there anymore. Now, people often talk of Sasquatch being harmonious with nature and living with the ecosystem. Sure, if you see one, that might be scary, but it's probably more awe than anything else. But this thing, I felt evil. I felt unnatural. It was sinister. It was stalking me, toying with me, and I believe it would have killed me. I have never seen nor experienced this feeling again in my life. It is a memory I tried to put past me, but I still had nightmares about it. I think until the day I die, I will always have that image burned into my memory. The best image I have seen that fits the description of this creature is the werewolf from the movie The Howling. So the witness later provided more information after I contacted him. He stated, "This is my first time bringing this story forward. The isolation is the worst part. It's just you and this creature out there, and if it decides that it doesn't want you around anymore, you'll disappear. Then your death will be ruled as either an attack from a bear or a wolf. Looking back, there were a lot of wildlife related deaths in the general area. I wonder if it was just a coincidence. My neighbor who was a chicken farm died. I tried getting a hold of him and finding things out, but his family was secretive. The address was on Highway 43 in Wise River, Montana. In my mind, there is no way this was a bear. I was so close to it that I could see every feature. It had an obvious canine appearance on the face and had hock legs like the legs of a dog. Misidentification is always a thing, but I don't believe this was anything like a bear. Maybe the whole sinister and evil thing is an exaggeration. If it wanted to hurt me, it would have done it. It's just how I justify coming face to face with something so terrifying. I think it looked like the predator that would rip me apart. It's just that it wasn't scared of me. Unlike other dogman stories I have read, this thing didn't run off or back away. It wasn't expressively aggressive in the encounter. It just silently watched me. Didn't growl at me either. It was just dead silent. Yes, I saw it very close. So close, I could even smell it. It smelled like a wet dog that rolled in something nasty. Very strong and pungent. When the light shines on its face, its eyes had that same reflection that cats would. Now, according to the next witness, there were a series of sightings that people referred to as a werewolf around Naperville, Illinois area around 2006. Naperville is west of Chicago. So I received the following account. Hi, I was talking to one of my good friends a while back in 2006, and we just somehow ended up talking about weird stuff we'd seen in our lives. He brings up the story of how one of our friends and her friends had a scary encounter. They were walking through a neighborhood at night and just ended up at a park outside of Green Valley Forest Preserve in Naperville, Illinois, which is a very big forest. So they're walking towards the park when they see what they thought was a tall person at the top of the swing set. So they stop and wonder who would be standing on a swing set at 10 p.m. at night alone. So they got closer, and the creature turns around. It was a hairy creature with bright orange eyes, standing upright at around 8 foot tall. It looked at them for about 5 seconds. Then it jumped straight down without making a sound and sprinted away. They got scared and ran back to their cars and went home. As soon as one of them got home, she was sitting in her house when banging started on her house. She then called up one of her friends, supposing it was him, telling him to stop. And he told her it really wasn't him. He said he was home and the same thing was happening to him. He never saw the creature. They never saw the creature again. They have been a few more sightings by people who say that they wake up early in the morning around 6 a.m. and will see the creature watching them when they're outside. Everyone who describes it as a werewolf. So here's my story. I and a couple of my friends went to the same forest preserve at night just to hang out and have a couple beers. We've heard about the story a couple of times, but thought they were just pulling our chain. But we were there for about an hour and we finished a beer and decided to leave. Well, my friend went to relieve himself near the edge of the woods and we said we'd wait for him. So he finishes up, walks back to us, and we're just walking back to my car in normal conversation, and he's not talking. We asked him, "Why are you so quiet?" He just told us to hurry up and move fast the car. I said, "What's going on?" So we get in our car, and he seems to be fine, and all is forgotten. I saw him every day after that, and everything was normal. Then a while later, sitting in a restaurant eating, and I mentioned the park and told him we should go do that again. And he flat out told me when he was doing his business at the edge of the woods, he saw two glowing orange eyes looking at him from about 20 foot away and getting closer. He didn't see the creature due to the fact it was almost pitch black, but he saw the eyes getting closer and he got scared. He told me he didn't tell us that night because he didn't want to scare us and he thought we wouldn't believe him. After these many years, I wonder how many other people have seen this creature. Now, in this older report, the witness states that she and her friends and family experienced a series of strange and unusual events. Now, I've been asked not to divulge the name of the community in a specific area, but I will say that the general area has had a high number of unexplained incidents over the years. In fact, Southwest Florida and in several specific counties in the region have exhibited almost every paranormal and supernatural phenomenon imaginable. So she writes to me, "Hi, Lon. We had a house in Southwest Florida back in the early to mid 1980s. For over a week, our neighborhood had a series of what I believe were werewolf stalkings. It was June, I think, and around 9 p.m., and I was out back on the patio. At that time, no one had any fences around their property because we all knew each other and the other families around the area. The only exception was a family across the street from us. They had a 7-foot tall cinder block wall behind their house. They had a large wooded piece of property and kept equipment out there. The dad was under construction, and the wall enclosed three sides of the property. It was hot out and a slight breeze, no clouds, and it was starry. As I sat there, I could hear the dogs in the neighborhood begin to bark. Then everything went quiet. A lone howl started. So I howled back. I do this rather well. I watch National Geographic and would mimic wolf cries. Anyway, this went on for about 5 minutes, and each time the howl from the other end got closer. Down the road are train tracks that run north to south. The sounds seemed to be coming from that direction. I started to get spooked as the howling stopped. Our yard had bushes and a tree on the side where the sound came from. Arms and neck started to stand up, so I felt like I should go in. As I stood, I heard movement by the bushes. I glanced over and saw something move. I didn't wait to see what it was, so I booked it into the house and I stood by the door, which had glass panes in it. I watched as something very large and dark moved about the bushes. It moved away and I could no longer see it from my vantage point. I went to the front porch to look out the windows, hoping to get a look at whatever was there, but it never came out that way. So I went to bed and read for a while to calm down. About less than an hour later, my brother came home. He came to my room and was white as paper. He was shaking all over, his eyes the size of saucers. I asked him if he was okay. Now, my brother is the sort that has an explanation for anything unusual. He's a big guy, so for him to be in this state was not normal. He said, I need you to come with me right now. I'll explain when we get in the truck. I was still dressed, so I got up and went with him. When we got outside, I asked what was going on. He told me there was something in the road by the railroad tracks he needed to show me first. I wasn't happy about that as I just had my own experience with something from that direction. As we got there, it looked as if something had exploded all over the road. There was blood everywhere, as if something was mowed down in that spot, but there were no body parts anywhere. My brother related then what he had seen coming down the road. He said, I was coming home, and as I got closer to the tracks, there was this huge thing lying in the road. I thought it must have been a Mastiff or Great Dane in the road, but as I pulled up, it didn't look like a dog I'd ever seen. It was hairy. Its head and nose were twice the size of a dog. The body wasn't a dog, just dog-like, but much, much bigger. It was all over the place. There was an arm on the road, not a dog, a human arm. There was no trace of anything when we got there. And it was only minutes that it took us to get there. I said, let's get the hell out of there now. And we went back home. I told him what I experienced just before he had gotten home. A couple days later, my sister came to me and said that she had been seeing a large dog prowling around at night. It's huge. And she had seen it across the street as she sat on the porch. I told her what my brother and I saw and not to be outside alone until we could find out what it was. We got together and decided to stake out the yard over the next night. Sure enough, it was back in the neighbor's yard. This thing was about the size of a Shetland pony, black in color. We had flashlights turned on, and it looked off to the back wall behind the house. Their dog was going off like crazy. They had a small terrier. We watched this dog thing scale the wall. The neighbor came out to see what was going on, and we shouted there was something in his yard. He went back in and grabbed his pistol and went around back, but by that time it was gone. Now, I hadn't heard anything else from that witness over the years. So I don't know what that was all about. Now, these next two accounts actually happened in the Pine Barrens in New Jersey. Of course, when you think of the Pine Barrens, you think of the Jersey Devil. That's not what happened here. In this first account, a South New Jersey man recalls his experience while with friends at the abandoned Brooksbury brick factory. The witness swears he encountered a werewolf. Hi, my name is George. I had a bizarre encounter close to the abandoned Brooksbury brick factory in Manchester, New Jersey. To start off, my brother had taken me to this place before. I thought it was cool, so I decided to go back there with a group of friends one night. And to my horror, we encountered something that I never thought would be real. So, as I stated above, my friends and I came back to the Brooksbury brick factory to explore it shortly after my brother took me and his friend Harold. He warned us never to go back there at night, but we didn't heed Harold's warning seriously to never go back there at night. He told me it was because he had some other experiences there that haunted him for a long time, thinking that he was joking around about that. But to fast forward to the story, my group of friends and I decided to go to the abandoned brick factory. When we arrived, we decided to go toward the path that leads to the factory. As soon as we got there, we felt an eerie presence and we felt like we were being watched. My friends and I were a little spooked. And as our eyes darted all along the wood line, I spotted something. In the wood line up ahead, I saw something that shouldn't be possible or that shouldn't exist. To my horror, there was what looked like a werewolf. Its piercing yellow eyes were staring into my soul, and it gave me the creeps when I was looking at it. To describe it, it was very tall, abnormally tall. I would say about 9 to 10 foot tall at the head, with large wolf like or dog like perked ears and a long snout. Its body was like the build of an Olympic bodybuilder, with large muscles that were visible through the massive fur that was standing there. But its head was like a German shepherd or a wolf, and its hands ended in claw like digits. I blinked to make sure that it wasn't in my imagination, and to my horror, my friends reacted to it as well. Now, my friends also saw this eerie presence, and they were all startled. To me, it felt like it was beckoning me to come closer, and its stare was so quiet and soul piercing, which both weirded me out and gave me the same sensation a deer would have when seeing headlights. It felt like it was waiting for the perfect time to strike, and I felt a primal sense of fear when looking at this creature. It kind of reminded me of an Egyptian jackal, except this shouldn't be real. The creature didn't do anything but stare at us and make us feel intimidated. And once we felt like it was gone, we ran out of the area. To this day, I'm still not exactly sure what we saw, but my brother showed me an illustration of a dog man. It made me shudder with fear. Whatever I saw that night looked like the illustration my brother showed me. And to this day, I'm still in disbelief of what I saw. I will never go back to that location. I felt like I was in danger the entire time, and I felt like this creature was trying to intimidate us and warn us to never come back to its territory. In conclusion, I don't know what I saw that night, but I hope I never see it again. And things really do go bump in the night. Be careful out exploring in the Pine Barrens and never go to the Brooks Bray Brick Factory at night. I have been to that location years and years ago. I've been to a lot of parts of the Pine Barrens, but I distinctly remember that factory. And in fact, it's interesting. Whatever remained back then, even it may be like that now, but every part of that of the structure that's still standing has graffiti all over it. Now, when I was there, I don't remember or had any experience at all. So, but this happened after had been there. Now, this next account, also from the Pine Barrens, a certified naturalist and his friends were driving in the New Jersey Pine Barrens when they observed a 7 foot tall, upright cryptid canine running near the vehicle. So he says, "Hi, I believe I saw a cryptid that most people would know as a dog man or a wolf man in the New Jersey Pine Barrens. When I received my driver's license at 17 years old, I started spending all my free time outdoors, hiking all over the East Coast, but mostly within New Jersey's Pine Barrens. I worked as a naturalist at the Batso Village in Warren State Forest for a while, which is the biggest state forest within the Pine Barrens. I got the job before my internship ended due to my knowledge of plants and animals. They did not expect me to have the credentials because at the time I was not even finished with my first semester in college. Now, I only give out that information because when I see an animal in the woods day or night, I know with 100% certainty what I'm looking at. And after almost 6 years from the time of writing his stories, I can't wrap my head around the creature that I saw. I am an open minded person to a point. I do believe certain cryptids can exist solely if the biology of the creature is possible, but that does not put a bipedal canine on my list. So, roughly about 6 years ago, I, along with two of my friends, one a welder and one a mechanic, and I would be naming the welder Chris and the mechanic Alan, went off roading in my friend Alan's truck somewhere in Manchester, New Jersey. We met with a bunch of Alan's off-roading buddies in a spot they frequented. I don't know the specific area, only that it was Manchester, New Jersey, and it was very close to the general vicinity of the abandoned brick factory. And hung out for a few hours, drove around the dirt trails, and just had a good old time socializing with other people. I did not have any alcohol or any pot in my system because after we left, I had to drive myself home. So I was sober along with with Alan, who was also sober, but my friend Chris was a bit high. We were beginning to leave, and as we were taking the trails to get back to the main road, my friend Alan told me to help look out for deer. He was driving about 35 miles an hour because the dirt path we were on was open, about 30-ish feet wide, and we were dead in the middle in case we did have to respond to a deer jumping out of the tree line. A few minutes go by, and my sharp eyes spot a deer running alongside the truck, but within the tree line, so the view of it wasn't more than a dark brown patch of fur. As I'm about to say something to my friend Alan, thinking that this deer is going to run in front of the car and try to commit suicide, it speeds up its pace significantly and gets about 20 feet ahead of the truck, still in the tree line, and then proceeds to jump out in front of the truck. For as long as I live, I will never forget what I saw that night. It ran onto its two back legs, looked right at us, and to our horror, it ran right by this about 30-foot wide road in 2 to 3 steps and went into the opposite tree line. In those few seconds, I saw this dog man or wolf man, and to this day, I cannot forget what I saw. It was roughly 7 feet tall, covered in dark brown fur. Every inch of the body I saw was covered in this fur, but its chest and stomach area had less fur and it was lightly lighter color fur than the rest of the body. But even under all this fur, you can make out the extreme muscle definition, very similar to an Olympic bodybuilder. It also had a canine type of head with a long snout, two distinct perked up wolf ears, and large muscular legs. The torso and arm were like that of a very muscular man with large hands. The hands had visible claws that looked like they could do some real damage. And the eyes reflected an unnatural color of light that I hadn't seen in the animal kingdom. As soon as it jumped into the opposing tree line, my friend Alan slammed on the brakes. My friend Chris said, "I know I'm high, but what the hell was that?" My friends, puzzled by what they had just saw, looked at me and said, "Okay, nature boy, please tell us what that was. That was something that was explainable." I sat there dumbfounded and told them I had no idea, based on reason, science, or anything, what this logically could have been. Alan hightailed it out of there. Now, to this day, my friend Chris has convinced himself that it was an hallucination because of the pot, and my other friend Alan, who doesn't believe in the supernatural and absolutely refuses to have an open mind, does not speak about this event and pretends it just didn't happen. To this day, I still have no logical explanation for what I saw, and I do not believe that a bipedal canine creature could logically or biologically exist. But what I saw was something matching that description with my own eyes, and it's very real. In this next account, a New Mexico man and his sister are driving near Carrizosa, New Mexico, when they both observe a tall, hairy, wild man wearing baggy shorts. He later believes that he may have seen a werewolf. A well known researcher mentioned in an older interview the tale of a child who had gotten separated from her parents at Yosemite National Park. When she was found, her story differed greatly from all others. She told her parents a dog man had followed her and laid with her to rest, had given her berries from his paw, and led her back to the family. This was the first time I heard anything suggesting werewolf type cryptids in the wild, and since then I just stumble on more and more. This recalls an incident between my little sister and me. She was 16 at the time, myself 24. We were on a placid highway through the Valley of Fires outside Carrizosa, New Mexico, bound for Ruidoso, New Mexico in 2011. As we rounded one corner, we both looked left in time to see a gray salt and pepper fur covered, very tall, very muscular man with the characteristic dog legs. We screamed and I swerved. We thought instantly that we had seen a goat man, yet there were no horns. Some goats don't have horns, so we didn't seem swayed by that detail. He was wearing some clothing. In fact, the most noticeable being baggy denim shorts. I know that sounds ridiculous, believe me. She and I were dumbfounded as to why something so wild looking could be wearing clothes. It was late afternoon, about 4 p.m., and he didn't hurry when he came into view. He sauntered on normally as though he didn't care if we were spotted. He didn't even look at our car despite my erratic driving when we noticed him. Now, I drive by that spot regularly on commutes for the doctor between Albuquerque, New Mexico, and Ruidoso, and though I've never seen him again, there's a small bluff right there with beautiful rocks and a tall stack that it would have taken 2 or 3 human males to lift and stack the way they were situated. I always see it and figure it was Mr. Wolfman who did it. Goatman simply makes no sense anymore. New Mexico is infamous for its Goatman stories, though we assume based on an idea planted by local history. Now, this next account, a young Mississippi man and his cousin were on a dark rural road looking for deer when they came across a 7-foot tall upright cryptid canine that boldly approached them. It writes, in the mid 1980s, my cousin and I saw this. I'd call it a werewolf. We saw it on a gravel road, but I was raised as a Christian, so seeing something like this, it looked like it was beautiful, but it was evil, and it bothered me for a long time. I came back from Dallas, Texas to my little town of Winona, Mississippi, where I was raised. My cousin said, they're having this Christmas party, and I said, look, I want to see a deer because I hadn't seen a deer in a long time. I've been in the city. She said, we'll take this poor house road, this little gravel road between the 2 main highways. And so we were riding in the little Toyota pickup, and the headlights hit what I thought was a deer. It was kind of hunched over in the road, and she said, there's one. And she took off real fast with the bright lights on, and we stopped maybe 25 foot from it, just thinking it's going to run off into the woods and everything, but it stayed there. And it raised up. It was like maybe 7 foot tall, but it had its back to us. And a little like rabbit or something took off. I remember seeing it going off to the right, and just for maybe a second, it blurred. It kind of moved back and forth. You can't see the pattern on the top because like a blur when it starts spinning. That's why I think maybe it was from another dimension because it spun like that. I mean, it kind of like blurred and it stopped and then it turned around and it walked straight. Not like a regular animal running in the woods to the left and the right to get away. Then it came straight for the driver's side of the Toyota. I was on the passenger side and it was really, I mean, it had fur, it had mud on the rump of it, and it was wire in the middle. Like you said, it was kind of leaning over toward the front walking. The legs were like big, like a donkey or a mule or a horse, but they were like a wolf. And they had that backward look to it. It was an animal, but I don't know. I thought about it for years. I don't know. Did I see a spirit? I just don't know. It had mud on it and it wasn't afraid of us. I think back now and, you know, I could have killed, it could have killed us if it wanted to. It walked right by. When it got to the front of the Toyota, It was a two-wheel drive. It was on the passenger side. I was on the passenger side, and it was so tall that I couldn't see when it got close to the front. And it started walking right down her side of the truck, and she looked up at this thing. She looked straight up at it. I couldn't see what was going on. All I could see was the fur and the rump, and that is coming from the driver's side window. And she made this weird sound like she was sucking air, like she looked straight. And I turned around and looked as if it walked by the back window of the truck, and it just kind of walked funny like a dog's leg on the back. You know, there's so many different when it's a dog standing up. It looks like it's almost crippled when it walks. Its knees were backwards. And as it went by, well, I thought, my God, what is that? And it jumped up a little sage grass bank, and it kind of cocked its head and looked at me just with its right eye. It never looked at me right in the eyes, just straight over. I thought I would have passed out. My cousin, when it jumped off to the woods, she said, that didn't look right. And we're still sitting there idling. It was so bold. It came along her truck and walked slowly. It wasn't running or anything like an animal. It was just walking. It wasn't afraid. And I said, it looks like a wolf. And she looked at me and she said, you saw the same thing I saw? She later went to the preacher and she asked him, what was it? He said, some people see demons and some people see angels. But for years, it bothered me so badly until I started seeing sketches of it. I thought, okay, that's exactly what we saw. And it really helped me. Weird story. This next account, a Maryland teen recalls seeing a tall werewolf-like cryptid while riding in his parents' car in Calvert County, Maryland. What did the witness observe? Now, this is on the Eastern Shore of Maryland. Now, this is a rather short encounter because I was riding in a car and basically saw it and rode past it. I have been past the site hundreds of times since, but have never gotten out and walked around the area. Maybe I should. This encounter changed my life. When I read the encounters by others, I never discounted them. Why? Because I know what I saw, and who am I to question someone else's experience? Sure, there are a lot of made up stories and creepy pasta out there, but I strive to find credible sounding accounts. So he says, it was the evening of July 1992, and my family and I were coming back from Chesapeake Beach, Maryland, after dinner with my brother, mom, and dad. I was 16 years old and in the back right passenger seat, chilling with my brother. Riding along, I'm just looking out the window, and there is a little road that merges onto the main road on the left. So as we merge, we pick up a little speed. We were going maybe 20, 30 miles an hour. And you must cross this little bridge, and it's bumpy, so we slowed even more to maybe 20. Once we did that, I looked up ahead, and about 75 yards ahead, I saw something standing on the wood edge off to the right a little. But it was exactly at the edge of the woods. It had both arms on a tree, just standing there, meaning its right arm was on the tree about shoulder height, and its left arm was on a tree at about shoulder height. So its arms were basically spread out with its hands on the trees. It was about 7 foot tall, maybe even taller. It had a wolf-like face, only larger, like a dire wolf from Game of Thrones. It had broad shoulders, very muscular arms, a barrel chest, and it narrowed the rest of the way down to the abdominal area. It was dark brown, and the hair was medium length. I didn't get a great look at the legs because it locked eyes with me. I knew that I saw it, and it saw me. I saw it a good distance up ahead and was like, what the hell is that standing on the wood edge? As soon as I said that to myself, I locked my eyes with it. I watched it for a good 10, 15 seconds because of how far up ahead I first noticed it moving around and how slow we were traveling. Its eyes followed the entire time. It took my breath when I first realized what I was looking at, and my first thought was, God, that thing is ugly. It had very pointy features, and it didn't look like a Bigfoot, but an actual werewolf. A lot of people call it a dog man, but I'm more inclined to say this was an actual wolf man. I said out loud to my family, "Did you guys see that thing?" Obviously, they were like, "See what?" Another thing, this was in Southern Maryland where there are no bears or other large animals. But I asked my family over and over if they had seen it, and they started getting annoyed with me. I told people over the years, but I was only ridiculed and teased about it, so I just stopped. So that was my encounter. This occurred in Calvary County, Maryland. My family still doesn't believe me either, and most other people think I'm crazy or lying. So I very rarely tell anyone about it. But it was real. It was there. I just want to know the W's of the creature: where, what, and why. And we've had sightings in Calvary County. Eastern Shore has had sightings in the past. And in fact, on that eastern shore of the Susquehanna and going down into Chesapeake, we've had several reports and had some investigations over the years. So people are seeing something. So here's the last account. If you have questions, you can go ahead and start posting them, please, in capitals on the chat. A Tampa, Florida area woman recalls a cryptid canine, or what she believes was a werewolf, that had stalked her neighborhood in the late 1980s. What did they encounter? So she writes, all I know is that the encounter I experienced frightened me so much that even after all these years, it still shakes me up to think about it. Until that evening, I had always thought of werewolves as being nothing more than just fairy tales, but that first encounter left a huge question mark inside of me. I come from a family of skeptics, so I decided not to tell anyone about what had happened to me. Then one night, my brother came home trembling and pale. He told me about his experience, and I felt relieved that I wasn't the only one who had seen something. It was after 10 p.m. on New Year's Eve in the late 1980s. We were living in the suburb of Tampa, Florida. It was either 1987 or 88. I was sitting out front of my parents' home, and instead of going out with my friends, I decided to stay home and celebrate the new year with my family. My father's car was parked in front of the house by the road, so I decided to sit on the hood, smoke a cigarette, and wait until midnight. The rest of the family was in the house celebrating. About an hour, after about an hour, I heard a strange sound coming from the neighbor's yard across the street. It sounded like a man was moaning in pain. The street and property were dark, so I couldn't see much except for the small light that shined off in the distance in the back part of the property along a cinder block wall, very similar to that other story I told you earlier. The wall where the light was sitting wasn't finished yet. The whole property itself was wooded with trees and tall bushes. The bushes of the property stood about 5 foot high and over and around 5 foot in width. I kept looking in the direction of the sound to try and see what was causing it. My first thought was that maybe someone was hurt, but then the sound changed and it went from moaning to a low pitched gurgling, then growling. The next thing I heard was a loud thud, as though something huge jumped and landed behind one of the bushes in the back part of the property. The sounds that followed were the sounds of something seriously heavy on all four legs darting behind the large bushes, moving towards me in a zigzag pattern. I started questioning myself as to what the heck this thing was. Was it a horse or a dog? It sounded so heavy, and I could hear its breath when its feet hit the ground as it came closer. I heard the growling again. It was like no dog I'd ever heard. It was at that point that reality hit me, and I realized that this thing was coming towards me. I suddenly felt the rush of fear go right through me. It stopped behind a huge berry bush that was across the street from me, which about 15 to 20 foot away. It suddenly became quiet, and I could hear the breathing. I couldn't hear the breathing or the growling anymore. I eased myself down off the hood of the car because I didn't want to make any sudden movements, especially since it was so close. The front door was about 30 foot away from where I was, and I didn't know if I would make it. I didn't know what this thing was, and I didn't want to find out. I was so scared I could hardly breathe. My parents had a lot of bushes and trees in the front yard as well, so I noticed a gap in between a couple of them and I started running. As soon as I started running, this thing started coming after me. I could hear it behind me as it came across the street. I heard its nails scraping the asphalt once or twice as it crossed onto our property. I was not about to look back, and as soon as I reached the front step, I jumped to the top step and quickly ran into the house and locked the door. I was shaking so badly that I felt like I was going to pass out. Even with the music playing inside the house, I heard the thing outside the front door growling, and then it went quiet. I heard another thud as though it jumped off the step onto the grass, and I couldn't hear it anymore. Suddenly, I heard my brother in law speak over my shoulder, asking me what I was looking at. I jumped and thought I was going to choke on my own words. All I said to him was, whatever he did, not to go outside. He started smiling. He said, okay. I guess he thought I was joking, but then he realized I wasn't. As soon as I took a couple of steps away from the door, he opened the door and went outside to check, but didn't go down the steps. He quickly came back and didn't say anything. I asked him what he had seen. He said there was nothing there. I didn't tell anyone about it, not even my brother-in-law. Now, later that night, around 12:30 a.m., after everything was quieted down, I was in the kitchen drying dishes when I heard the most terrible snarling growl right outside the window where I was standing. I suddenly dropped the plate I was holding and it shattered on the floor. The fear crept back and I started trembling again, realizing that the thing was still outside, but it was along the side of the house towards the back and not the front. I backed away, staring at the window, but it was pitch black outside and I couldn't see anything. My mother came into the kitchen and I complained about me dropping her plate. I still didn't say anything because I didn't think my family would believe me. I did tell my father that I thought I saw someone outside looking into the window. He grabbed his gun, went outside my brother-in-law, and yelled, trying to scare them away. They must have left because we just didn't see anything else. So, you know, I've always wondered if that story was related to the other one. Uh, they were both in Florida, Southwest Florida, and they never gave me the first one. Never gave me any idea where they were at. So, I mean, was it the same neighborhood? Or was somebody else, or what was it? I don't know. Anyway, let's get to the questions. First of all, I want to thank Robo1776 for his donation. He asked, I've read reports on dogman attacking people. Is there a possibility a werewolf could be involved? I guess it's possible. Uh, these werewolf stories are very far in between. I don't get many of them. I don't, a lot of times when you read other accounts, it seems like people try to get these mixed up together. Dogman is a werewolf. Is it human like? It's got human characteristics or whatever. Yeah, I guess it's possible a werewolf could be involved. You believe in that thing. Nancy Malcolm, thanks for the $4 super sticker. Moon Dogs for the $5 donation. Mortal Clown for $10 donation. And Nisi, $20. Thanks for another great show. Thank you. And thank you for your donation. So let's look here and see what questions we got. Big crowd tonight. Very appreciate everybody coming in. Okay. Michelangelo Escalante. Why does the moon turn people into werewolves? I just think that's part of the legend or the lore. I have never found any any actual indication that that's true. You only see that in the horror movies or in the books. Uh, I don't think that's true. I mean, yeah, the full moon does seem to bring out possibly the worst in some people, but I don't know. I just don't think that has anything to do with it. Amy Crew, how about all the wolves in the fairy tales from Europe? Well, that's what they are, fairy tales. But then again, this whole legend started in Germany and France. And like I said before when I started, there's a lot of real accounts of possible lycanthropy or some type of transformation. But I think most of the stories of the Loup Garou and others are people who have had some type of disease or they're poisoned with some type. They have blamed a lot of that rye fungus from the rye grain affecting people, and they had some outbreaks of that during those periods. So I think that might explain some of it. But yeah, there are a lot of sightings and a lot of accounts that had coming out of France back in the 16th and 17th centuries. Nancy Malcolm, is there any stories about werewolves becoming one because of curse placed on them? Oh, there are a lot of stories. You know, I think it's just legend. I mean, as far as actual accounts that I have gotten, um, I don't think I've ever gotten one that involved a so-called curse. But you hear the stories about witches, Navajo witches, and skinwalkers and transformation, and possibly other witch curses or some type of occult phenomena. I think a lot of that has to do with some type of um, brainwashing or mind manifestations of some type, convince the person to actually take a form like that, even though they don't naturally transform. But in their mind, they think they're actually being cursed. So in that case, I think they may very well change, personality wise. Alexis Chaston, Lon, do you think Bigfoot is actually a werewolf? No, I don't think so. With all the reports, I think some people do misidentify. I think people who see, especially an upright canine, uh, may believe that they're looking at a Bigfoot or something like that. And I think there has been some misidentification, but I think they are really two very distinct cryptids. Um, but like I said, I don't think there's any connection between them. From accounts I have heard, not only here in Pennsylvania but in other places, the two cryptids, if they're in an area, they try to stay away from each other. Butch and I have talked about for years about um, the possibility of cryptid canines migrating, and there's been some talk about Bigfoot actually migrating. Uh, uh, I think maybe they seem to do that, but they seem to stay away from the big the valleys, and the cryptid canines usually travel on the ridges at certain times a year. From what I can deduce from some of the sightings we have received. I think there are some migrations that go between Pennsylvania, Maryland, and down to Virginia, and possibly into West Virginia. Why they migrate, I don't know. I don't think it has anything to do with any hibernation. If it's anything, it's probably food or climate or whatever. But I don't think they're the same. Michelangelo Escalante. Any stories about werewolf paw prints? Um, no, I haven't seen anything that I would call looking human, but looking a lot like a having claw marks. I have seen Bigfoot prints that look like they may have claws on the end of them, but I think that's just the way the foot was pulled out. It kind of distorted the print. There was a Pennsylvania Bigfoot Society actually received a Bigfoot print call about a week and a half ago. They went out there and they went out and cast the prints, but the print itself looked kind of weird. It did seem like it had claws on it, but and I looked at it. I questioned if it was cryptid canine or it was Bigfoot. And I talked to Eric Altman about it. I talked to Stan about it. Um, they seemed convinced that it was Bigfoot, but it was in an area in Blair County where we've had a lot of cryptid canine sightings, a lot. So I don't know if that's what it was or not. But as far as werewolf paw prints, I can't really say that I have seen anything that I can absolutely determine is that. Let's see. Jose Sanchez. Hi, Lon. Could the werewolf, dogman, and dire wolf all be related in lineage, ancestors, but not in a species? They all sound somewhat. Yeah, they. You know, if you take them all in all, they kind of do seem similar. I think it's a possibility. I think for the most part, these beings, like I do think a lot of Bigfoot are interdimensional beings. I mean, are they very similar where they come from? Do they change when they get here, or do they manifest here as they look where they come from? I don't know. I don't know. It's hard to determine. I mean, everybody's got their own idea of what these cryptid canines really are. A dire wolf would be a quadruped, so that wouldn't be an upright being, as opposed to a werewolf, dog man, upright canine, or something like that. But they do all. I'll agree. They do sound similar. Amy Crew. I think the people changing into wolves in Norse myth. I think it's a myth. I mean, uh, there's been all kinds of cryptid. I mean, all kinds of canine legends in a lot of different societies over the past 1,000 years, 1,200 years or so. I mean, even the Egyptians, of course, the Anubis legends, or maybe they were aliens that kind of took like a form that was recognizable to the humans. Maybe their gods were like that, the head of an animal with the body of a human. But anyway, I think it's just part of their religion for the most part, especially in the Norsemen. They had quite a few, a lot of different legends involved in their religion. So I don't know. It's possible though. Let's see. Alexis Chastain. Are werewolves evil or demons? I don't believe in demons. Could they be evil? Sure. There's a lot of evil in the world. Uh, could they be supernatural? Sure. I think they are supernatural for the most part, even though they are flesh and blood beings, or described as being flesh and blood. I've never had an encounter with one of these things. But I tell you what people tell us when they have these encounters. They sure do look real and sure do look flesh and blood, but are they evil? There's no way to determine that. Jose Sanchez. Do werewolves also stand upright as do dogmen? Oh, absolutely. I mean, they they seem to be naturally upright. Um, and a lot of times we'll see the dogman or the being described as being quadruped and upright. Um, we've identified different types of dog man here in Pennsylvania. We've had the quadrupeds, which I give the moniker as actual dog men. They're hyena looking. They got the slope back. They're huge, but they don't stand up. They don't stand upright. But of course, we get the separate upright canines or bipedal canines, which I believe is entirely something entirely different. Do they have races? They may possibly do. I think Bigfoot possibly has races. There's a lot of difference between some of them. Who's to say that cryptid canines aren't the same? So I guess it can be considered as that. Jose Sanchez, are werewolves dogmen similar in height range? Um, most of the werewolf sightings I have seen and been around 7 foot for the most part. The dogman or quadrupeds, in my opinion, but the bipedal canines or upright canines can get as high as 10 foot. We've had some pretty harrowing encounters here in Pennsylvania, 9 to 10 foot beings. And the description is if you remember the Underworld movie series with the lichens and the werewolf. I mean, the lichens and the werewolves or lichens and the vampires and such. That's the reason I called the lichen loop the lichen loop because of that movie, those movies, the Underworld, because these things were described us as being that tall. And we've had a lot of sightings of these very tall, upright canines. So that's where the name came from. Michael Angelo Escalante is the Egyptian Anubis, the original werewolf. Who knows? Who knows? I don't know. Their gods are considered part of the religion. I don't know if you can consider that a werewolf or not. I don't know. They don't seem to be shape shifting beings that go from all human to an animal form. They're always seen as just having the jackal head in the human body. So I don't think there is that they are werewolves. Jose Sanchez, how far south and what has been the earliest and latest accounts of dogmen? Oh God, they go back as far as, like I said, the Egyptians, and even the Greeks had what they said were dogmen that were on a certain island off of mice. What is that? Well, it was an island. It was off the main part of the Peloponnesian Peninsula. But there's a lot of these cryptic canines and dog-headed men legends and such. Can we can we take them for what they supposedly? I don't know. It's such a wide open subject. Thomas, could a hellhound be a type of werewolf? Um, I don't know. Possibly. Even though the hellhounds are quadrupeds, they're very supernatural. We get some pretty weird stories of hellhounds out of Great Britain. Get a few here, but they're normally associated with fire and manifestation, but most are described as being quadrupeds. Okay, folks. I want to thank you all for coming in tonight and, for watching and chatting. And if you donate, it's really appreciated. Your support is what makes all this possible. So please like, subscribe, and share. And if you do have a sighting encounter report or encounter report that you'd like to be considered for the show or to be posted, please send to me at launchcircularphantomsandmonsters.com. So until we meet again next week, please stay healthy and have a great weekend. I think it's supposed to rain most of the areas here in the east, which we've got kind of used to, I guess. But again, thanks for showing up, and I'll have next week's show up, and we'll figure out what we want to talk about. So until then, y'all take care.